Every character, location, or experience you've read about in my crime fiction novels holds a piece of reality. I'm Helen Taylor. Welcome to the story behind my stories, the video podcast where crime fiction meets my authentic experience. Here, we delve into the real-life inspirations and intimate stories that shaped my novels. Discover how my everyday encounters, adventures, and travels translate into tales as gripping as they are genuine. The story behind my stories goes behind the words on the page to reveal the backstory that inspires my writing. Hit follow or subscribe and ensure you're part of this journey. Hi everybody, welcome to episode 6 of the story behind Aloha Goodbye. Last week we were on Hilo, and this week I want to talk about Maui. Now, if you read the book, Maui has some significance, and part of that significance is Krispy Kreme. That came about, as you know, from my own personal experience. Now, as we mentioned in the dining episode, I'm a celiac, so I can't eat donuts, Krispy Kreme, anything like that. But Lauren luckily is not. She hasn't inherited that from me, and she loves Krispy Kreme donuts in particular. She's very, very much a big fan, and when we were going to America, and in order to then go on the cruise to Hawaii, she did her research to see really if in LA there was a Krispy Kreme that she could visit in its native country. But there wasn't anywhere near where we were staying that first night. And then she found one in Hawaii, and there is only one Krispy Kreme in Hawaii, and it's on Maui. And I knew, that she really wanted to go there. And, I had it when I was younger. When I was younger, I always wanted to visit all the Planet Hollywoods in the world. So I started collecting the glasses from Planet Hollywood, and I had a massive big shelf of Planet Hollywood glasses until I, decided no more. I don't even know what I did with them all. I don't have them now. And there were a lot of them, but I don't know where they went. Anyway, so I knew where she was coming from. I knew how she felt about that and what she wanted to do. And so I was quite open to that with her, but I wasn't prepared to spend a fortune in a cab across to the other side of the island. As it turned out, Krispy Kreme Maui was not far from the port, so that was our plan. We booked an excursion in the afternoon to go snorkeling, and in the morning we were going to take the bus and head to Krispy Kreme Maui. And so I built that completely into the book, or rather I needed one of the crew that was going to do a runner and had a job and an apartment and everything lined up. And I thought, okay, he can have a job lined up at Krispy Kreme. So I'm going to read you the extract, which was very similar to mine and Lauren's morning that day. So this is an extract from chapter 26 of the book. Jane had him well organised, and as they dropped back down to deck 5, she explained to him the route they would take to the first stop, then the bus, and then a short walk from the bus stop to Krispy Kreme. They walked through security, tapping their seat keys as they left. Goodwin nodded, almost imperceptibly, at the second officer manning the security gate. Nobody else knew that less than an hour ago they'd all started the day, sat in a room together around the table discussing the demise of 2 passengers on this cruise ship. Following Jane's lead and her instructions, they walked through the port terminal entrance gates heading onto the island of Maui. Maui smelt different. Somehow it felt lighter and less brooding than Hilo had. It was brighter too, but Goodwin didn't know if that was the sun, as it was a clearer day today, or that he was enjoying some time with Jane on the Hawaiian Islands, just for a few minutes, not thinking of murder. They found the bus stop just outside the port gates, and waiting but a few minutes for the correct bus. As they went to get on, Jane pointed out the sign on the window by the door. On the window that shielded the driver, it read, "No mask, no ride." If you remember back at the start, I mentioned that this was post-COVID that we went, and it is in the book too. Just post-COVID. They both pulled masks out of their pockets before stepping onto the bus. It was less than an hour's walk, and it may well have been that Juan intended to walk it rather than catch the bus, but they didn't have time to do that both ways, and be back for their afternoon excursion. This too was likely the bus that Juan would have taken, only later in the day. He wouldn't have been able to bring a lot of stuff, not that it seemed he had much in his quarters, because to all intents and purposes he was just going ashore for a time, then getting back on the ship later in the day. Goodwin wondered whether these things were the same for the crew as they were for guests. For guests, if they didn't come back from an excursion, the ship would leave without them. That was part of the passenger agreement, unless, of course, you are on an excursion organised by the cruise line, which I've mentioned to you before. But what was the situation when a member of the crew didn't return? Does the ship leave without them? Does that ever happen? He'd have to check it out, but it probably depends on the level of importance of the member of staff. An officer not returning could be treated completely differently to a stateroom steward. Were there obligations on the cruise line to ensure their crew returned, as there may have been on the flight? But that might not be an issue here, because they hadn't actually left America, even though some of the Americans on board didn't necessarily understand that they didn't need their passports, as they were still in the United States. Obviously, though, Goodwin and Jane did, but that's because they were visitors to the United States. So 2 things I want to pick up there. Firstly, yes, there's a lot of Americans on the ship who queried whether they needed their passports. It's not unique to Americans and Hawaii. I've heard people asking if they need a passport to go to Scotland, back home. So it is, it's not unique to them. But yes, there were various people talking on the ship about needing their passport to get off the ship. And then the other point was, I'd mentioned before about, it's very clear in the passenger agreement that if you leave the ship at port like you do, and you go on an excursion or whatever, if you're not back on time, the ship will go without you, unless you're booked on a excursion with the ship. Then they'll be missing more people than just you. But if you go off and wander on your own and you don't come back, then the ship will go without you. What I was questioning in there was, would the ship go without you if you were a member of staff? And continued on that sort of vein. So let me continue. The bus travelled mainly through an industrial area and a little residential area along a main road until they reached a small shopping centre where they alighted from the bus. They started walking in the same direction the bus would travel for a short way, as Goodwin tried to get his bearings. He stopped to point out the road sign of the street they were about to cross and said, "Isn't this where his apartment is?" He thought he'd recognise the name of the street. Jane tapped away and zoomed in her Google Maps and then nodded at him, showing it on the screen the pin for Krispy Kreme, the pin for his rental apartment, and the blue dot for where they were now. Goodwin took Jane's hand, and they continued walking not much more than a few steps before the Krispy Kreme sign appeared ahead of them, with the path leading up to the doors. If you're watching this on video and you're seeing the intro with all pictures of my time in Hawaii, you will see the picture of Krispy Kreme Maui there in that intro. Goodwin opened the door for Jane to walk through, and she headed directly to the counter and started busying herself, with indecision, on choosing her selection of doughnuts. The chocolate sprinkles one, and at least one original glazed, would be in the box, he knew, but what else? He'd have to wait and see. Meanwhile, Goodwin asked if it would be possible to speak with the manager, and the young girl serving Jane asked her colleague. He nodded and headed out of sight somewhere. A moment later he returned with a woman who looked more managerial in dress and demeanour, following him. The server, who happened to be the barista, pointed to Goodwin. The manager nodded and came over to talk to him, still on the other side of the counter. She greeted him and asked what he needed. Goodwin leaned closer and asked if she could come this side of the counter and they could take a seat for a moment. It was clear from his tone and his request that it wasn't really an option, and that whatever this stranger needed to discuss with her, with his British accent, was important. She nodded, turned back to her colleague, mumbled something, took 2 cups of coffee and walked around the counter. She passed one to Goodwin, pointed to the milk and sugars, then directed him to a small 2-person table, and they both sat down. Goodwin glanced over at Jane, but she was still mid-donut selection, so he gave his attention fully to this conversation with the manager of Krispy Kreme Maui. So Lauren got to go to Krispy Kreme Maui. I thought it was quite cool because, like I say, my memories from when I was a kid of collecting Planet Hollywood cups. The only difference here is that she walks away, she eats the donuts, and they're gone. You can keep the box, but the box is the same the world over as its franchise. But what we did get her is a t-shirt. So she has a Krispy Kreme Maui t-shirt that she loves to wear, and it was really cool to go there, and she was super excited about the different donuts, and whereas Jane's doing it on her own while Goodwin's further in the investigation, I was obviously with Lauren and we were picking them together, and chose ones that were very Hawaiian or tropical inspired rather than standard ones, but they are different from what we get in the UK as well. So, yes, that was a really nice trip out, and it was really good as well to just not always be on an excursion, going somewhere where you see what you're designed to see, and you get all the history. Whereas this was going off the beaten track sort of thing, to where people lived normal lives, had jobs, went to work, weren't on holiday, or part of the tourist trade. So that was really cool. And then we got the bus back, and we had so many comments in the lift in the ship going back up to our room of people. Oh, Krispy Kreme, where did you get that? Where did you get that? Where did you get that? So yeah, she had a dozen donuts that she shared with her friends on the ship, and ate over the following few nights. And she's got the T-shirt to remember it, and the photos, which, like I say, you can see in the intro. So Goodwin does a bit of investigation there, which I can't tell you too much about because it will give too much away. You have to read the book. And then they return to the ship, and then they go off on the snorkelling trip in the afternoon in the same way me and Lauren did. So again, using my own experience of that trip, but putting it into a setting where Goodwin is watching a couple of suspects from the cruise ship. So this is now an extract from chapter 27. There was only so much more they could continue to do in this sort of scenario. They couldn't keep having crew go on excursions to keep an eye on passengers in a suspect pool, of which there were really only one or two they wanted to be watching. Goodwin had been supportive of the captain's decision to not let this out, and it had seemed the speculation and gossip had dropped slightly across the murmurs of conversations on the ship. So, as always happens, somebody knows something, and Chinese whispers, as it was called when I was at school, goes round, and then it's blown up into something completely different to what it is. But in this case, there is a murder on the ship, and the back stuff says, are they putting islanders at risk? And the captain's under pressure when his decision to keep the crimes on board from other passengers is questioned. Whether that would be the case, I don't know. I have poetic license on this. So it is part of the story that they are trying to solve this crime without. They do interact with the police force on each island, but the bit I did research, Murder at Sea, it is nobody's jurisdiction in the way it would be at land, where you would know it was whichever police force responsibility. And so the conversations, that speculation among the passengers from some Chinese whisper they had calmed since Hilo, etc. Likely the killers thought they were safe and undetected. They had no reason to run, no reason for anyone to be suspicious of them, and able to continue as normal, along with everybody else. So they had to get a bus to a different port for smaller ships, not a cruise terminal, in order to take this snorkelling trip. The sun was high over the Pacific. At the pier, the minibus had dropped them for their snorkelling excursion. The golden reflection shimmered across the deep blue waters all along the Maui coastline. The warm air carried the scent of salt, seaweed and coconut suntan lotion, mingling with the excited chatter of the group boarding the sleek catamaran for their eco-tour to Molokai Crater, one of the most spectacular snorkeling destinations in the world. Among them stood Goodwin and Jane, blending seamlessly into the crowd. From beneath his sunglasses, he quietly observed all the passengers, but his attention lingering most on the two men on the far side of the deck. Now I'm not going to tell you the next bit because it gives things away. At the helm stood Kai, the tour guide, exuding effortless charm and enthusiasm. His sun-kissed skin and easy smile radiated the kind of warmth that made everyone feel instantly at home. "All right, everyone," Kai called out over the hum of the boat's engine. "Welcome aboard. Today's journey takes us to Molokai Crater, a protected marine sanctuary teeming with life, crystal clear waters, vibrant coral and more tropical fish than you can count." The boat groaned as it slowly drifted away from the harbour, cutting through the sapphire waves. Conversations erupted across the deck, some hushed, some exuberant. Mark leaned back, arms stretched wide, basking in the ocean air. "Man, this is the life," he bellowed, drawing glances. "Nothing this beats this, huh, Rick?" Rick, ever the cynic, smirked. "Yeah, sure beats prison food." I'll leave that one with you. So now they're heading out. And again, it was a case of let me incorporate this into the book. We did it, we were there, we experienced it, and it was just perfect for using in the book. And I couldn't have the whole thing at dinner and the crimes all come out and the investigation all goes at dinner. Having these excursions and watching different people in different environments all adds to the mystery and the challenge. The ride to Molokai was nothing short of spectacular. Maui's lush coastline stretched endlessly, with cliffs rising majestically against the vast Pacific Ocean. The colour of the sea merged from deep navy to brilliant turquoise, and back again, depending on the relative depth and the sun shining across its surface. As the catamaran neared the crater, Kai's voice rose again. Molokai is one of Hawaii's best snorkeling spots, an ancient volcanic caldera that was caused by the collapse of a volcano after a major eruption some 230,000 years ago. Or in Hawaiian mythology, it's said to be the body of Molokai, the woman that Pele, the fire goddess, saw as her rival to the love of a prince, and she beheaded her, threw her body into the Pacific crater, creating the crater. Now the large coastal reef is protected and is home to more than 250 species of fish, 38 species of coral, and 100 algae. Look out for the yellow tangs, parrotfish, and maybe even a moray eel or white-tipped reef shark. Passengers busied themselves changing into swimming costumes and trunks, finding their goggles and towels, and adjusting snorkel gear they'd picked up from a selection box at the back of the boat. Goodwin followed suit, though his mind remained on the suspects. I'm going to leave it there. We did then go snorkeling, and it was amazing. As you might have heard in tie-dye, I tried my paddy. Freak out when I go underwater, but snorkeling I can do. And it was the best snorkeling I've ever done in the world. I could see the most, and both me and Lauren were heads down the whole time that we were allowed in the water snorkeling. And then we had burgers and chips and hot dogs and cocktails on the trip back to that small boat pier, and then back to the ship. So that was a quick run through of Maui in Aloha Goodbye. So I'll leave it there for this week, and I hope you enjoyed listening. Please do follow, subscribe, head over to my website, sign up for the newsletter, and then you might find in advance some of the inspiration behind my books and special offers, deals like that. And remember, Lethal Leith Hill is out at the end of the month, and I am going to tie the launch of that in with the new season of the podcast. So there's only going to be a really short break between Aloha Goodbye and Lethal Leith Hill on the podcast, so that you get a sneak peek before the book comes out, and then it will go inside. So if you're reading along, you can listen to the podcast too and get the inspiration behind it. So I will catch you next week, where we are in Honolulu. Thanks for listening.